Today we will gonna cover the show Spectacular Spiderman from beginning to end. Spectacular Spiderman is one of the most beloved cartoons of all time. It was an American superhero animated series with total of 26 episodes and 2 seasons starting in 2008 and ending in 2009. This animated series tells the story of Peter Parker, a high school student, receives extraordinary powers after being bitten by a spider. He must now try to balance his personal life while trying to save the city. In this video we will cover the first season of the show, and if you love the video we will make a part 2 on other one. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. The night before school starts, Spider-Man, alter ego of Peter Parker, stops an attempted bank robbery. In the background, a shadowed figure tells Hammerhead to kill Spider-Man. The next day, an aerodynamic engineer named Adrian Toomes is outraged at Oscorp for stealing his anti-gravity project, accusing Dr. Octopus until Norman Osborn arrives. Osborn dismisses Toomes, calling him a failure, and escorts him outside. Meanwhile, Peter arrives at school and tells his friends Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn that he is determined to get a date with Sally. But she and Flash Thompson humiliates him in front of everyone. After school, Peter and Gwen are offered an internship at Dr. Connor's lab and both accept. Peter goes to Harry's apartment where Norman congratulates him on his newfound career. Toomes, going by the name the Vulture, breaks in wearing a suit with built-in metallic wings with his anti-gravity technology incorporated into it and kidnaps Norman. Peter changes to the Spider-Man costume and follows the Vulture. He succeeds in rescuing Norman but loses to Vulture in a fight. Later, Peter goes to the lab where he meets up with Gwen and her close friend Eddie Brock and Connors. When he finds out he will not be paid for the internship, he tries to sell pictures to the Daily Bugle publisher J. Jonah Jameson, although he is kicked out immediately. That night, Norman is attacked by the Vulture once more, and when Spider-Man tries to stop him, he is fired upon by the enforcers who distract him while the Vulture chases after Norman's limousine. While being pursued by the enforcers, he follows after the Vulture and ends up defeating him, while getting the assassins off his back next to Dr. Connor's lab, where he demonstrates to his interns Peter and Gwen a new potential source of clean energy. After Gwen and Peter leave, an electrician, Max Dillon, attempts to upgrade the lab's electrical filters but gets electrocuted and is sent to the hospital. There he is found to be emitting strong electrical fields and is placed in quarantine, but Max escapes the hospital. Peter, meanwhile, is assigned to teach a popular girl named Liz Allen. He's attempting to teach her science in a cafe when an angry Max enters and accidentally short-circuits the power. Peter believes him to be dangerous and pursues him. As Spider-Man, he manages to photograph Max and remove his mask. Max, enraged, attacks but flees while Peter is distracted by a phone call from Aunt May. The following day, Peter discovers that his photographs have not developed properly but is still able to identify the man he fought as Max. He meets with Dr. Connors, Eddie and Gwen to seek a way to contain Max, who has meanwhile been attacked by the police and has decided to seek help from the lab. On arrival, though, Max becomes aggressive and threatens Connors' wife. Eddie distracts him long enough for Peter led the girls to safety and return as Spider-Man. After that, Max names himself Electro and starts to fight with Spider-Man. The battle leads the pair out from the lab, and Spider-Man knocks Electro into the water, causing him to short-circuit into unconsciousness in the lab. Dr. Connors picks up a vial of lizard DNA that Electro had electrified and leaves with his wife at school. Peter is attacked with water balloons by Flash Thompson, which he dodges until he realizes it might reveal his secret identity as Spider-Man. Gwen steps in and gets everyone laughs at Flash. Instead of Gwen and Peter go to the Connors lab and help Eddie, cleaned up from a previous battle with Electro. Martha announces that Kurt's arm had grown back and they celebrate, until they realize scales are growing on his arm, determining that the reptilian half of his brain is taking over. Peter tries to comfort the Connors' son Billy, gets interrupted when Kurt transforms into a hulking humanoid lizard and runs off. While Eddie goes in pursuit, Peter manages to slip out and goes after Connor as Spider-Man. While trying to communicate with him, they end up on a subway train fighting. There, finally, Spider-Man falls off the train and Connors escapes. Spider-Man returns to the lab and is given a gene cleanser from Martha, which must be administered to Connors. He then goes off to Bronx Zoo, where Connors is reportedly at. Spider-Man enters the lizard room where Connors has taken refuge. Connors knocks him out, and Eddie arrives to help him out. When he regains consciousness, Spider-Man comes up with a plan to trick him into the polar bear pond. They almost succeed when Connors is alerted by Spider-Man's cell phone ringing. Billy then arrives and tries to talk some sense into his father, but it is useless and Spider-Man leaps in to get Connors into the pond. Spider-Man pours the cleanser into the mouth of Connors, who as a result returns to normal. His arm was lost once more. The next day, Peter gets the lizard photos published in the Bugle and get the money he needs. However, when Gwen, Eddie and the Connors find out, they are outraged that he ran off simply to take pictures and say he has lost their trust. Although Martha understands the difficult choices that Peter had, she fires him. He secretly grabs another vial of gene cleanser and returns home frustrated about his reputation, blaming the events that gave him his powers. He is about to take the vial that would eliminate his spider DNA. Then he sees a photo of himself with Ben, realizing that he had saved Kurt. Either way, he decides that Spider-Man is needed and hides the vial under his desk. Montana and the Enforcers steal a powered suit from an armored Tricorp truck. After gassing the guards, Montana hands it to Hammerhead, who insists that Montana dons the suit to complete the big man's contract to kill Spider-Man. The next day, Peter Parker got across town as Spider-Man, unaware that Montana and his men are watching him. He then hangs out at Harry's apartment discussing the upcoming fall formal, until he receives an email from J. Jonah Jameson of the Daily Bugle informing Peter that Jonah wants to purchase his photos of Spider-Man. He leaves and promises to help Harry with homework later. At the Bugle building, Jonah mistakenly kicks Peter out before realizing who he is. Jonah pays him and makes him exit the building. While heading back, Peter hears an alarm coming from a landfill and investigates. It ends up being a trap and he is attacked with sonic blasts by Montana, now wearing the suit, and calls himself a Shocker. When he is close to moving in for the kill, one of the thugs used as bait. Alex O'Hearn accidentally gives Spider-Man time to recover. Shocker then knocks him into a machine and satisfied leaves via helicopter. Spider-Man, however, survives, but his paycheck was torn to shreds. The next day after school, where Harry is outraged with him over missing out on studying, Peter goes to replace his check at the Bugle, where assistant editor Joe Robertson suggests getting a better camera. After Jonah takes a photo of Spider-Man covered in garbage as Peter's submission, Peter goes after O'Hearn and his partner, Flint Marko. As Spider-Man, he defeats them and tells them to inform Shocker he wants a rematch. Peter makes it home in time for his curfew and spots Aunt May struggling with the bills but must use the money he has to buy a new camera. When he goes to school the next day, he finds Harry is furious with him once more over forgetting their studying arrangements. Once more at night, Hammerhead tells Shocker the big man is displeased with his failure. Meanwhile, Peter unsuccessfully tries to ask out Jonah's assistant Betty Brant. After a tremor rattles the entire city, Peter, as Spider-Man, discovers it is the Shocker, leaves him a trail that leads to a condemned theater. During their fight, Spider-Man unsuccessfully tries to find out who hired him before finally bringing the building down and defeating the Shocker. Meanwhile, Harry returns home where his father Norman tells him to take responsibility and study by himself. Norman then goes to meet with Hammerhead, revealing that he helped them steal the suit from Tricorp as they are his company's competitor. He talks over speakerphone with the big man, who wants him to create new super villains to occupy Spider-Man in return for ample funding. At his house, Peter sends his photos to the Bugle and tries to give Aunt May the money, but she insists that he uses 10% of every paycheck to save for a new camera. Spider-Man effectively defeats two common thugs, Flint Marko and Alex O'Hearn, and puts them in prison. While discussing their outrage towards Spider-Man, their bail is paid and they go into a limousine. Inside the limousine, Hammerhead tells them he has big plans for them, taking them to a secret base. The next day, Peter practices his web slinging in his bedroom. When Aunt May walks in, he stops, and she suggests he takes their neighbor Mary Jane Watson to the upcoming fall formal. Peter cringes at the idea and heads off to school. There it is announced football practices will be held that day and Harry wants to try out. Peter passes on joining him as he feels it will reveal his abilities when he hears Flash Thompson planning on specifically going after Harry during tryouts. He decides to keep him safe and try out. Anyway, they each do good at tryout. Harry impresses the coach and the other player, while Peter does the same using his extra abilities. Meanwhile, Norman Osborn arrives at the warehouse to supervise an experiment on Marko. Restrained Marko will be given subdermal silicon transplants, giving him a hardened, untraceable silicon armor. Dr. Octavius says that the experiment has too many flaws, but Osborn commands him to go with it. Anyway, the experiment malfunctions and the silicon violently mutates him. His body evaporates into sand, and Octavius, terrified, thinks he has just killed him. Suddenly, Marko reshapes himself, still made of sand, and viciously thrashes against the walls for them to let him out. Hammerhead and Osborn take him outside in their limousine, where Marko is able to reform himself in his old appearance. When they tell him he will work for the big man, but he decides to go alone and leaves. Hammerhead is fine with that, as it means they will now have a distraction for Spider-Man. Now codenamed Sandman, Marko robs a bank and Spider-Man arrives immediately. He is overpowered by Marko's new powers and finds himself out of web fluid. After defeating Spider-Man, Sandman escapes through a sewer drain after accidentally mentioning the big man's name. The next day, Peter wants to go find Sandman after school, but Liz Allen wishes him good luck on the football tryouts. Peter goes to tryouts again, doing well once more and being invited for the last day of tryouts along with Harry. Harry is upset that he outshined him and invites the other players to hang out at a soda shop. Meanwhile, Peter goes on the city bus and sits next to Gwen, whom he apologizes to for ignoring her lately, and she accepts. She also hints that he should take her to the fall formal, but he does not get the clue, and tells her he asked out Betty Brant, J. Jonah Jameson's secretary at the Daily Bugle. After departing from the bus, Peter goes off as Spider-Man to an armored truck which Sandman is robbing. In their struggle, the truck goes out of control and lands in a construction site. When Spider-Man tries to web him up, it proves to be ineffective as Sandman can slip through them. The villain then starts to attack Spider-Man with girders. Meanwhile, at the soda shop, Harry tries to impress the jocks, catching Kenny's girlfriend Glory's attention. Kenny plays a prank on Harry which enrages Glory, and she asks Harry to take her home. Back on the construction site, Spider-Man gets out from the pile of girders and gets the head on Sandman. He lures him up to the roof and encasing him in cement from the nearby cement maker. That night Harry comes home to tell his father that he's tried out for the football team, but he is unimpressed. Harry walks off darkly, remarking that he will show them tomorrow at final tryouts. The next day Harry makes the team along with Flash's friend Hobie Brown. Peter purposely does terrible so he doesn't outshine his friend. Gwen then cheers him up with ice cream. Dr. Otto Octavius is preparing to attach a titanium resin exoskeleton onto Alex O'Hearn's body model. After that of a rhinoceros, though Octavius is wary about going through with the experiment. Hammerhead forces him to activate it. O'Hearn's body is surgically attached to the suit and is given immeasurable strength. Meanwhile, Peter Parker is at the Daily Bugle trying to ask out Betty Brant to his school's fall formal. Despite their 4-year age difference, she finally agrees to consider it and Peter hurries homeward exhilarated. Until he realizes he will need money for the date. He tells his best friend Harry about his plans at school the next day. Peter then receives a text message that his Aunt May is having lunch with Betty at the Bugle. O'Hearn dubs himself the Rhino and storms through the Bugle main office where Aunt May and Betty are having luncheon. Demands that J. Jonah Jameson tells him where Peter is as he knows Peter photographs Spider-Man. Jameson spots Peter hiding after just arriving and lies to Rhino about not knowing where he is. Peter sneaks off and dons his Spider-Man costume, then engages Rhino in a fight. He wonders what the big man has been up to with all the supervillains like Rhino. He has been organizing. Spider-Man has a large-scale brawl through the city and soon realizes that Rhino needs to be constantly hydrated in order to fight. He lures him into a steam tunnel and breaks all the pipes, dehydrating Rhino into unconsciousness. As he passes out, Rhino accidentally mentions that Big Man is really a man named Mr. Lincoln. Peter goes back to the Bugle and claims to have been hiding the whole time. Betty pulls him aside and tells him that she is simply too old to date him and is sorry. Peter, still downtrodden, remembers what the Rhino said and asks a reporter named Frederick Foswell if he knows about anyone by that name. Foswell tells him about L. Thompson Lincoln, a philanthropist who is rumored to be a dangerous crime lord for years. That night Peter goes to Lincoln's office as Spider-Man to find out if the rumors are true. Lincoln prefers to be called Tombstone and wields incredible strength. He pins him down and suggests that he work for him, fighting crime like usual but turning his head when it comes to his crimes. Spider-Man refuses to do so and runs off. When Peter gets home he is depressed. Aunt May insists that he gets dressed for the formal and explains that she has arranged for him to go with Mary Jane Watson. Peter thinks that she will turn out to be a plain girl due to the descriptions Aunt May has given him. But when she arrives he learns that she is an attractive girl and is flabbergasted. On the night of Midtown High's fall formal, Harry Osborn arrives with his date Glory and some football players along with their dates in a stretch limousine. When his friend Gwen Stacy tries to greet him, he ignores her and goes on his way. Soon Peter Parker arrives and stuns everyone with his attractive date Mary Jane Watson, whom he introduces to the group. Flash Thompson tries to ruin the date by mentioning a bet. He and Peter had. Mary Jane is unscathed by the idea of the bet and goes to dance. Harry goes to get drinks and overhears Glory getting back together with her ex-boyfriend. He is furious and goes to his locker where he drinks a vial of green formula. Meanwhile, across town, a mysterious Halloween-themed green and purple, costumed and psychotic supervillain called the Green Goblin breaks into an Oscorp laboratory late at night and steals several pieces of equipment, including a glider. With the equipment, Goblin flies off and attacks a group of thieves who are working for the crime lord, the Big Man. He uses some stolen money as incentive for them if they work for him, and they accept. Now armed with personal terrorists, he crashes and holds up a black-tie dinner party orchestrated by the Big Man and his alter ego as philanthropist L. Thompson Lincoln. Lincoln is unimpressed and sicks his guards on the Goblin and his terrorists, but they are defeated easily. Air Force Colonel John Jameson tries to fight them too but is also taken down. Peter is contacted by the Daily Bugle to go take photographs of the holdup at the party, and is forced to leave Mary Jane, who understands as it is his job. Peter arrives at party as Spider-Man where he is greeted by Lincoln. At first Spider-Man thinks Goblin is simply working for the Big Man but is confirmed. Otherwise, Goblin briefly tries to convince Spider-Man to join him but is turned down, so the Green Goblin makes it his mission to kill Spidey, so the two proceed to fight. Spider-Man shoots a web at the Goblin's glider and is immediately defenestrated. His web fluid is out but he refuels and is pursued through the streets by Green Goblin. He finally defeats Goblin, wrapping him in webbing. The Goblin explains that a pumpkin bomb was hidden back at the black tie event. When Spider-Man returns to find it, John Jameson opts that the pumpkin bomb is hidden in the chandelier and Spider-Man retrieves it. He launches the bomb into the sky and it harmlessly explodes. However, when Spider-Man goes back to arrest the Green Goblin, he has mysteriously disappeared. Back at the dance, Harry's group is outside and take the assumption that they have been abandoned by Harry because he has not showed up. In actuality, Harry is hiding at the wall near them and takes another drink of the vial of formula before walking off. Soon after, Peter returns to find the dance almost abandoned except for Mary Jane, who is dancing with another boy downtrodden. He is reassured when Mary Jane walks up to him and tells him that she saved the last dance for him. Dr. Otto Octavius tries to complain to Norman Osborn about the dangers of some experiments they have done to create supervillains in his laboratory. how Spider-Man could trace them to Oscorp but is quickly berated by Osborn for his whining. Octavius goes to work inside an experimentation chamber while Osborn leaves unbeknown to him. The Green Goblin sneaks into the lab, activating the chamber's generators while locking Octavius inside while unsuccessfully trying to escape from the chamber. The radiation emitted fuses the mechanical tentacles he is wearing into his skin. Osborn and others arrive on the scene to turn off the generator, while Spider-Man jumps in to help get Octavius out of the wreckage. When Octavius wakes up, he attacks Osborn with his tentacles. When Spider-Man tries to intervene, Octavius brushes him aside as well, with one of his tentacles declaring himself Doctor Octopus. He steals a power battery to recharge his tentacles and runs off. The next day, Peter, Gwen, Harry, and some friends go to Kenai Island, where Harry impresses everyone with his strength. Liz begins to attach herself to Peter, and the two have a fun time. However, Peter spots Doctor Octopus and abandons the group to pursue him as Spider-Man. He follows Doctor Octopus to Tricorp, where he tries to steal a power pack from a vault. Spider-Man swoops in and gets to the power source before him. He then runs out, with Doctor Octopus pursuing him, hoping to cause the Doctor to run out of energy. They reach Kenai Island and Octopus kidnaps Liz with only an hour of energy left. He climbs to the top of a roller coaster, forcing Spider-Man to choose between the power pack and Liz. Spider-Man throws the pack in the air. Before rescuing Liz, he gets close to Doctor Octopus as the latter scrambles for the power pack and is able to take it away from him, successfully defeating the Doctor. When Peter returns to the group, he discovers that Liz is breaking up with Flash Thompson. Sally blames Peter for it and runs to comfort Liz. Gwen approaches Peter and the two agree they need to have a talk with Harry about his attitude towards them and constant strange behavior on the night before Halloween. Green Goblin kidnaps Hammerhead. The Goblin tries to convince him to join his ranks, but Hammerhead refuses as his loyalty lies solely with the big man. Later, Goblin confronts Tombstone and steals a jump drive he is carrying, declaring that he can take it back from him. Later that night, before he sails off on his glider, Spider-Man spots him and they begin to juggle. Goblin reveals that he possesses the jump drive stolen from Tombstone and that he can have it. Later that night, before kicking him off his glider, Spider-Man tries to catch up with him and notices him sneaking into his friend Harry's apartment. Sneaking in, he spots Harry's father, Norman, coming out of a secret passageway and theorizes that Norman is the Goblin. Spider-Man is forced to slip out after Harry walks in and Harry drinking an experimental drug-like formula. A short while later, Peter Parker calls Harry and invites him to a Halloween carnival along with Gwen, Mary Jane, and Liz. Harry accepts the invitation. On his way to the carnival, Peter attempts to sell some Spider-Man photographs to J. Jonah Jameson, but he refuses. Goblin breaks into Oscorp and steals an inhibitor prototype. Peter arrives at the carnival still dressed as Spider-Man, but everyone assumes it is just his costume and applauds him for it. Peter slips out after spotting fireworks caused by the Goblin erupting in the sky. He follows them to a steel mill where he finds Tombstone. The two enter together and find Goblin as Hammerhead suspended over a vat of molten metal. The Goblin reveals that the jump drive is fake. Goblin readjusts his focus on Tombstone and Spider-Man, who are forced to team up to fight the villain. While accusing Goblin of being Norman Osborn, Spider-Man fires one of the villain's pumpkin bombs and injures Goblin's leg. Goblin escapes on his injured glider and Spider-Man follows him to the Osborn apartment. An injured Goblin takes off his mask and is revealed to be Harry, who is revealed to have been secretly drinking Globulin Green, an early-stage experimental, yet highly unstable and addictive performance enhancer. Harry collapses and Norman and Spider-Man agree to arrange the Goblin's disappearance while taking Harry on an extended leave from school so he can receive special help. The next day, Peter learns that Mary Jane has transferred to his high school. Peter Parker rushes home and excitedly informs Aunt May that alien life has been discovered. Peter turns on the TV to see that the black sludge from John Jameson's shuttle has been sent to Dr. Connor's lab for analysis, hoping to see the symbiote. He calls Eddie Brock but learns that reporters and photographs are banned, so Peter visits the lab as Spider-Man, only to find the lab already has a visitor, a young woman in a skin-tight black suit, who is in the process of opening the alien's containment chamber. As they trade punches and quips, the thief introduces herself as Black Cat, informing Spider-Man she was hired to steal the alien. Spider-Man turns her down, but in the course of their fight the alien escapes and latches onto Spider-Man's heel. Dr. Connors bursts into the lab and Black Cat retreats, and when Spider-Man realizes that the alien is gone, he chases after her to no avail. The next morning, Captain Stacy interviews Dr. Connors, who expresses disbelief that Spider-Man would have stolen the alien. In a warehouse, Dr. Connors chortles over the headlines and peels off a mask to reveal himself as the Chameleon. Taking a phone call, he informs his employer that he failed to steal the alien. Spider-Man, again chasing Black Cat, is oblivious to the darkness spreading up, his costume turning a jet black with a white webbing pattern and spider emblems. Black Cat interrupts his inner monologue, alerting him to the fact that his red and blues are black and white. Peter realizes the alien must have bonded to his costume and runs when Black Cat gets too close for comfort. When an out-of-control airplane flies past, he discovers the black suit actually enhances his strength and agility, enabling him to successfully rescue the pilot and stop a construction crew from being crushed by a falling girder. Realizing the black suit could help him save more people and earn more money, Peter opts to keep it. He returns home discovering the suit can retract beneath his clothes. Later that night, the chameleon dressed as Spider-Man robs a bank using tricks to simulate Spider-Man's powers. The next morning at school, Peter is surprised to learn that Spider-Man is now guilty of being a bank robber. The chameleon robs another bank, and Peter walks in on a jubilant Jameson, who announces his victory over Spider-Man. Black Cat offers him assistance and leads him to a gala hosted on the mayor's yacht, which Captain Stacy and J. Jonah Jameson are also in attendance. The chameleon infiltrates the party disguised as Norman Osborn, changing into his faux Spider-Man costume and taking the party hostage. Black Cat and Spider-Man crash the party on a jet ski, and while Spider-Man confronts the chameleon, she takes out Mason and Beck, who were disguised as a dockhand and waiter. Outmatched, chameleon attempts to retreat, but Spider-Man apprehends and unmasks him. Jameson reluctantly orders a retraction, and Captain Stacy pardons Spider-Man for the crimes he was accused of. Later, he meets up with Black Cat, who congratulates him by stealing his first kiss, revealing she stole the mayor's tiger-shaped gem necklace, and then literally leaves him hanging. Max Dillon is discharged from Ravencroft Asylum, thanking Dr. Kafka for helping him recover using his control over his electrical powers. He calls Otto Octavius, informing him to get ready and thanking him for his advice and counseling at Rikers Island Penitentiary. Octavius informs Montana, Marco Toombs, O'Hearn, and the Enforcers that it is time for them to escape and exact revenge on Spider-Man. Electro short-circuits the cell locks, enabling them to escape with the help of Hammerhead, who returns Octavius's tentacles, Vulture's flight suit, and Shocker's equipment. In the morning, Peter prepares to head out, discovering that the black suit can flow onto his body to save time dressing and produce its own webbing. He persuades Aunt May to go to the theater with her friend Anna Watson. Despite her feeling bad, Peter follows a police car to find Rhino trashing Times Square. G is ambushed by Sandman and is surprised to find Shocker, Vulture, Electro, and Doctor Octopus waiting for him as well. Aunt May attempts to stop them from ganging up on Spider-Man, and Doctor Octopus calls a ceasefire so they can get to safety, but once inside the theater, May collapses from a heart attack. Outmatched, Spider-Man is forced to retreat and successfully escapes. That evening, Mary Jane arranges to go on a date with Eddie Brock, but is disgusted when he pulls Daredevil stunts through traffic, bad-mouthing Peter the whole time. At the Bugle, Jameson is furious that Peter missed getting a scoop on the Sinister Six until he learns that his aunt was hospitalized, calming immediately and phoning to tell him the bad news. At home, Peter ignores Jameson's call, thinking he was going to yell at him for not sending pictures, and heads to bed, assuming Aunt May had safely returned home and gone to bed herself. Peter dips his hand over the side of his bed and the symbiote latches onto him. Spider-Man arrives at the bank and is captured by Doctor Octopus, but the costume lashes out with tentacles of its own, and Electro accidentally blasts Doctor Octopus, enabling Spider-Man to break free. Spider-Man systematically defeats the Sinister Six, flattening Electro beneath Rhino, webbing Vulture between two trees, and using Shocker's gauntlets to disable Sandman. Dr. Octopus grabs him, attempting to impale him on Rhino's horn, but Electro loses control of his powers, forcing Octavius to drop him. Spider-Man knocks Octavius out and lifts him by his coat, about to impale him on one of his own tentacles, but Captain Stacy tells him to stand down, and he leaves. Back at home, Peter wakes up more exhausted than when he'd gone to bed and discovers a cut on his arm, realizing the symbiote must have taken over his body while he was asleep and used him to fight the Sinister Six, but opts to keep it regardless, reasoning that as long as he got paid it didn't matter. Mary Jane interrupts his brooding and informs him that his aunt, who he had assumed was still in bed, had a heart attack and was in the hospital. Spider-Man rushes to the hospital, having learned of his aunt's heart attack, and is confronted by Eddie Brock. Peter is relieved to learn his aunt will survive, and Aunt May laughs it off, telling him to go to school. However, on his way out, Peter is confronted by the bill for May's medical expenses, and at school he lashes out at Gwen, MJ, and Liz when they try to comfort him. Peter storms off and makes his way to Lincoln's Tower, where he easily defeats Tombstone's bodyguards and agrees to accept the gangster's earlier job offer. Tombstone agrees, but tells Spider-Man he is forbidden from fighting petty crime for 1 week in order to prove his loyalty. At Connor's lab, Eddie learns that he is out of a job and thus unable to attend ESU because the funding given to study the alien had been withdrawn over lunch. MJ comforts Gwen and urges her to confess her feelings to Peter, while Peter returns to the hospital, where he is confronted by Eddie, who blames him for losing his job. Peter coldly rebukes Eddie, and the two get into a brief fight before a security guard breaks them up. He ignores a phone call from Gwen and is confronted by Flash, who calls him out for being aloof towards the people who care about him the most. Confused, Peter leaves to clear his head and realizes the symbiote is negatively influencing him. He arrives at a church, trying to ignore the symbiote's attempts to convince him to keep it. He attempts to rip it off, and during their struggle he collides with the bell, disrupting the symbiote. He starts to peel it off, but the symbiote engulfs him in a cocoon and drags him into a battle in the center of the mind, where it attempts to convince Peter that he is useless without it by making him relive how Uncle Ben died. It nearly succeeds, but an apparition of Uncle Ben appears and restores Peter's heroic resolve, enabling him to use the power of friendship to repel the symbiote. Spider-Man rips it from his body and returns it to the lab, where he finds Eddie Brock. Eddie is initially overjoyed to see the alien return, but when Peter freezes the symbiote in an attempt to kill it, his joy turns to shock and rage. The symbiote breaks free from the ice, encasing it, and Eddie willingly bonds with it, learning that his two enemies are one and the same. As he is transformed into the monstrous Venom, having rid himself of the symbiote, Peter reneges in on his deal with Tombstone. Later, he is approached by Venom, who offers to take up the job. Spider-Man rejected. He accepts on one condition. Spider-Man heads the next morning at the hospital. Peter visits his aunt and leaves a picture of Uncle Ben at school. He thanks Flash for the reality check, and Flash begrudgingly acknowledges him but warns him not to mention it to anyone. He also apologizes to his friends for snapping at them the other day, and Liz invites him to help hold the school football team's mascot balloon at the Thanksgiving Day parade. MJ informs Peter about Eddie's grudge, and Peter calls to apologize. Venom answers the phone sinisterly, saying he'll meet up with Peter shortly at the hospital. May is given a clean bill of health and is eager to get home to prepare dinner, but Peter volunteers to handle Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, he makes a mess of the kitchen. Peter is attacked by Venom, who reveals he knows who Peter is. Peter recognizes the symbiote and expresses disbelief that it survived and bonded to another human, but Venom sneers at him and easily defeats him, saying that he intends to make Peter suffer. Peter realizes Venom is targeting Aunt May and chases him to the hospital, where Aunt May is examining an anonymously given get well card sent by Venom. Spider-Man attacks him before he can strike, and Venom opts to target Peter's love interest, revealing himself as Eddie Brock. Thinking Venom would target Mary Jane, Spider-Man rushes to the parade where Flash is attempting to flirt with MJ, discovering too late that Eddie's actual target is Gwen, chasing after them only to find Gwen's discarded saxophone. He finds her suspended from the Midtown High mascot balloon, but before he can rescue her, Venom attacks, revealing he is immune to Peter's fighter sense. Spider-Man goads Venom into slashing the balloon so that it would land gently, but Venom snaps the line and tackles Spider-Man. When he attempts to carry Gwen to safety, she is caught by the football team, and Spider-Man attempts to take Venom down but is sent flying through a water tower. Realizing he can't win on his own and that the symbiote is trying to prove a point, Peter offers himself to it. The symbiote immediately abandons Eddie, causing him to pass out. It attempts to bond to Peter again, only to realize it was tricked and is once again repelled by the power of friendship. Peter prevents it from rebonding to Eddie by scooping it into a sack and dropping it into a pool of freshly poured concrete. Peter returns home to find Aunt May already there, and Gwen and Captain Stacy arrive with dinner and help him clean up the mess he had made. As the Stacys prepares to leave Peter, and Gwen awkwardly says goodnight. Gwen suddenly kisses him, leaving Peter shocked. So that's it, and that's all. So if you loved the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let us know you want the next part of this video. Thanks for watching. Sayonara.